make it there and can make it back.
Salutations and shit, folks. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite travel podcast, Travel and Shit, where I, your host, D. Gary, have an experiential conversation about the nuanced ways that travel intersects with regular life. And we are back this week with a new episode. I've actually been enjoying the replays, so there will be more of those. But this week, for whatever reason it was this week, but I was being very nostalgic. And I, for whatever reason, was really wondering what actually shaped my perception on travel. But more so like in an what was I watching? What was I reading? What was I listening to as a kid that had me think that travel like wasn't for me, right? I'd flown as a kid. I'd been to probably like Atlanta. It was probably just like family. And I'm trying to think of if we drove to Disney World or if we flew to Disney, because I know I went to Disney World when I was like 7 or so. But I had flown as a kid. I had gone on road trips as a kid. But for whatever reason, that didn't necessarily feel like a family vacation, because as a kid, my idea of family vacation was what people were doing on TV or whatever. It just didn't, even if I was going on a road trip like somebody I saw on TV, it didn't occur to me that that was traveling for me, if that makes sense, right? Um, so I was going to do like a rewatch. I was really going to go back and say, well, let me actually watch the shit that I was watching in the 90s and the aughts. I think that's what we're calling it. I don't, not like in a, um, ooh, what do the kids call it? No, like I think that the aughts is like the early 2000s, because I always wondered like what do you call like the early 2000s, like the single digit, like the 2007s of it all? Like you call the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the aughts. That's what I think it's actually called. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And if you actually know what it is, kudos to you. And I am impressed that that is a piece of information that you have. But I was going to do a rewatch of the shit that I was getting into. And I was kind of primarily focusing on what I was doing before high school. But then, like the early aughts, I was already in high school. So it's kind of like, okay, so at what point did it occur to you that you were consuming media different? There was a whole, like, it ended up just being a bigger thing than travel. So I had to scale it back. I was going to watch like Wishbone. Used to love Wishbone. I was going to watch, what did I write down? I was going to jump back into, okay, so Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I was obsessed with that whole Rick Moranis shenanigans. It was absolutely my bag. I don't know how many of them I went to the movies to see, but I'm pretty sure the first one, at least, I went to see the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I don't know if we went to go see like Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. And then I think there was like a third one also. Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. I think that was another one. They were good and campy. Then Ernest, the whole Ernest saga. Ernest goes to Washington. Ernest goes to camp. Whatever. I watched it. Pee Wee's Playhouse. Pee Wee's Wild Adventures. Pee Wee done went to camp in Eureka, wherever. But I got into Ernest. I had Ghost Rider that I used to love. I loved Romeo and Juliet. I feel like that may be like the first movie that I remember crying in, was Romeo and Juliet. And I'm talking the Leonardo, the Leonardo. Why is that name difficult for me? The DiCaprio version. I want to say it was Claire Danes in that one too. And oh boy from um Oz. What's my man in the? We're gonna put respect on his name. Let me. I don't want to refer to him as the man in the wheel. chair from Oz. I knew his name. Harold Pernod. Much respect to Harold Pernod because our man has been working for a long time at that. But was also in Romeo and Juliet. Jason's Lyric. I remember watching that at court. Happy birthday, Courtney. My bestie's birthday was the 25th, whatever that is from recording. We watched that at one of her birthday parties. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. That was actually one of my favorite movies for a long time. Also, Adventures in Babysitting. I was going to go through all of those and try to pull together like a little piece of what may, and mind you, maybe like not all the things that were episodic. I wasn't going to do the episodes, but see what the general consensus of 10-year-old me was. What was on my plate? What was on the docket? And what visuals, because a lot of times we rewatch things. Like I was watching this TikTok of this girl that was going through Boy Meets World and was really breaking down how shit Sean was to Topanga. And rewatching the clips, it was like, oh my gosh, she was right. Like we were being brainwashed. We were being prepared to accept bare minimum from niggas that was not worth our attention. Shawn Matthews was, not Shawn Matthews, excuse me, Corey Matthews was absolute and utter trash to that girl. Maybe not the whole series through, but my God, where there's some really, really like nasty interactions, just like him just totally ignoring the things that were important to her and trying to minimize her and her accomplishments because it made him feel inadequate. If I find it, I'll link the TikTok in there because woo. And so I was like, what am I going to uncover about some of the other stuff that I was watching and where is that going to lead me to travel? Because I know that there were shows that were about travel. Specifically, I watched the hell out of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? There was a show called Land Before Time. Now, granted, that was a time travel, but that was absolutely something that was on my radar. I want to say Henry and the Hendersons. I feel like they were on a road trip in that National Lampoon, Home Alone. So there were movies that, of course, would put travel in my brain. But what was I going to do to kind of get a feel for what I felt as a kid? And then it hit me that I'm never going to fucking know. I recall, retention, not my ministry. And then I also realized, regardless of what I was watching on TV, um, like my home life was also a factor. My family was a factor. Like the way I was raised was a factor. So it's, you got to piece all the things together. So I kind of like did and decided not to do a deep dive. But what I did do was like cheat code. I ended up actually watching one of my favorite YouTube accounts. I love intellectual media. So our girl is a scholar. There's no other way to put it. Absolutely going to have the link in the description box to the video in particular that I'm referencing. But overall, her content is a deep dive into historical happenings, specifically with a lens on Black people, specifically Black women. But there is content that isn't specific to Black women, but a lot of just like the 90s, the 80s. She goes back to the 70s. Like she does different, I don't want to say generations, decades, and she'll do different topics. And this video in particular was shit. I'm trying to think of it's. She's got a whole Lexual does the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, and the one that I saved it and didn't go to the same. Let me see if it's right here. Oh no, not the politics, not the party culture, video games. Oh, this is the 90s here. History of food, money, New World. Oh, that's what I think. That's what it was. New World Order, Global Events, 1990 to 1994. or was it okay? It might have been Growing Up in the '90s. I'm showing that as a watch video. I definitely watched the 1990s true crime one, where she went over some of the really popular like sensational crimes from the '90s, like Lorena Bobbitt, um, John Benet Ramsey, those types of things. But description box, love her content. And I was watching that and I realized I was absolutely aware of international affairs. Like I absolutely remember the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall, not like in a first person. Wow, I remember me watching it on TV. I was like fucking four when the shit. It happened in '89. Um, but I absolutely remember it being front of conversation and happening a lot and being brought back up into conversation, whether it be something on the news. Because shout out to what was his name, Kurt Loder, but VH1, MTV actually had programming other than music videos, um, and MTV. No, Kurt Loder was, I want to say VH1. I forgot what it was. Also, watching intellectual media content reminded me of Linda Ellerby. I think her name was Linda, but she did this thing. I think, was it called Nick News, Kids News, or something? I used to watch that every morning that I could, and it would be not a round table, but it'd be a gathering, comfortable, casual, if you will. But it was a show on Nickelodeon, and was it Nickelodeon? It was either on Nickelodeon or MTV. Um, it was, I think it was part of the Nick News content bubble. But she would have kids talking about current affairs, and she would have kids talking about sex, war, different political issues, just stuff that was happening in the news, but from like a kid's perspective. So the world, I don't want to say was my oyster, but the world was present and accessible in an extent that I didn't just exist on my block. I was part of the world. So there was that content where Kurt Loder would do like news briefs and host like young people. I don't want to say like summits, but like they would do shows. There was programming specifically dedicated to what was happening in the world, and it was easily accessible because it wasn't like I had to be into CNN. It was right here on the channels that I was watching: VH1, MTV, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, Cartoon Network. That was pretty much my cable bag. Um, and so everything was there, but for some reason, and it had to be, no, for some reason, it's not a mystery reason. It's a reason that I see now as an adult. I think it was representation because all of the people that I would see were very much so white people. They didn't look like me. Spring break was a thing, but spring break was what the white kids did in high school and in college. And then of course, there was, after a while, like BET became a thing. And then we could see, oh, they just did Freaknik was another point of reference in terms of travel that did have representation, but it didn't necessarily last for the demographic of time that I was old enough to get there. I feel like Freaknik fell off maybe like early 2000s, and I didn't get to college until, well, early 2000s. Um, but I definitely wasn't in school during the Freaknik era. So by the time I got to school, Miami Beach and all of those, Myrtle Beach, Miami Beach, those were on the docket, but like I didn't have that friend group. So there was always something that I felt was missing because I didn't look like what I was seeing. And so the conclusion that I did come to was that representation absolutely matters, but not in possibly the most traditional ways that we think. We generally think of representation mattering when we're kids, right? And it does matter. But for whatever clique or you know how those like little pops of clarity come to you. I realized that the parallel here was that I can pinpoint when I saw that representation for me in terms of travel, right? And for me, that was probably the 2016s, 2000, maybe from 2013 to 2016. I can't necessarily think that it was just like 1 year of seeing it all of a sudden gave me enough um, confidence to go do it for myself. But I started seeing Black women solo travelers because of Instagram. And so I saw more and more women that looked like me going out there and doing it myself. And then I actually saw women that were accessible to me, women that I knew and that I had connections with. Shout out to Marissa and Anissa. Those were the two women in particular that I said, oh, like, no, sis is actually there, so I can go because I see myself in these people. Like, I know them, I've met them. And so it's just like, oh. And then I think I had asked the question about anybody have any uh, travel agents they could recommend or anything. And Anissa was like, girl, do it yourself. And it was like, "Mm." And she was like, trust me, you can absolutely do this. And so then I realized, okay, me seeing it and me seeing women do it themselves and put these things together and consistently consuming that content made a difference for me in my bigly age of like 30. And so the parallel here is what in your life can you definitively or intentionally is what I'm looking for. The word I'm looking for is intentionally shift to give yourself the representation you need. Follow me here. Right now, I see how, wow, travel was always right there. It was just that one little piece of, I can really see this and believe it's possible that made the difference. What would that be in my life now? What can I intentionally give myself representation of? And by that, I mean, what can I actively search for or consistently consume that will help me shift for myself the way I was able to shift for myself travel, right? So I started seeing Black women travel on their own, put the trips together, like book and curate the trips themselves. And that became something I could do because I saw it. And in my life now, what I would call into, and it's not like it was something that I specifically went to grab to say, this is for me. It happened for me because I kept seeing it more. And it was a beautiful part of piece of serendipity, I guess. Serendipitous, if you will. But what I would like to intentionally shift that way for me is home ownership. At this point right now, the only way I see myself owning a house is my parents giving me the house I grew up in. That's it. Is inheritance. Inheriting a house is the only way that I currently see myself being a homeowner. And on the one hand, it's different from travel because I can't really say that it was something that I had like a very clear thought process around. Whereas in travel just didn't, it wasn't something on my brain. So I can't say what I did or didn't think about it just because I wasn't thinking about it. But owning a house was something that I always kind of, thought about and saw, and what's that going to look like for me as an adult. Those are things I thought about as a kid. I didn't think about what type of trips I would be taking as a kid, but I always thought about what kind of house I would have. But now that we're in the now of things, with the world being the world, something that I saw for myself no longer feels attainable or achievable. And so what I am challenging you guys to do is to take this little plunge with me and figure out something that we want that travel representation for? I didn't know I needed travel representation to get me to the place where it becomes real and tangible and something that is of me until it happened. But now that I know that that process exists and has that power to shift, there's no reason why I shouldn't use that to do the same thing with something else. And so in this instance, for me, I have chosen and I have decided that it is the idea of home ownership that I kind of want to engineer into my life. And it's not always about just the money, right? Because I had started making money before I started traveling. I just didn't know that the little bit of money I was making at the time could remotely make travel accessible to me. And I also had to shift what I thought travel was. One of the things that I do in every episode is remind you guys that travel is so much more than vacation, right? And that was something that I had to come into. Wasn't always what I thought travel was. I had to come into that through experience. I started seeing that I was actually a traveler before I thought I was a traveler. I was going to Virginia. I was going to New Orleans. I was going to Georgia, where Virginia, I said Virginia, DC. Like I did a lot of like East Coast travel on my own, going to see cousins and friends. And I did all that solo, right? But I didn't really see it as travel because it didn't look like what I thought travel was supposed to look like. I thought travel was supposed to look like, we're talking nostalgia. What's his name? Robin Leach. Lives of the Rich and Famous, right? I thought travel had to be opulence. I thought it had to be expensive hotels. I thought it always had to be flying someplace far away. And then I grew up, started traveling, and realized, girl, going to Jersey, the next state of like 30 minutes away, can be travel. Like travel doesn't have to be as limiting as you think it is. So, looping back to the challenge, I am challenging you to join me with curating the presence, the peace, not the peace of mind, but the the shift that you want to see for whatever it is you want to see. You don't gotta want to own a home. That's not for everybody. I love being outside. I always grew up, I always had a yard. I love being outside, like in my yard. I don't want to have to walk to the park. I don't want to have to, rent a space to put up an inflatable pool. Shout out to Danielle and Alma Swim or Alma Ocean. Alma Ocean. Um, I would like to be able to have a garden if I want to have a garden and not have my garden confined to a windowsill, right? So for me, it's home ownership that I am actively going to curate, right? And we'll tap in with the curating in a moment. But think of something that either you thought at one point you could have, but at this point in your life, it seems a little bit inaccessible or unattainable. Or consider something that you've never thought that you could have, whether that be a relationship, whether that be parenthood, whether that be owning a pet, whether that be having a green thumb. For the longest time, I thought I didn't have a green thumb. I just realized it's about how much attention you put into it. Um, you can actually do a lot of things that you don't think you can do if you don't see yourself being that person that can do that. I didn't know how, I don't want to say easy or difficult caring for plants can be, but when I actively paid attention to what was going on with my plants, can't say I do that now, but when I was into plants, if you will, when I was giving them my attention, it became something that became easier for me to do well. And that's because I put emphasis on it. I started consuming plant content. I was following a bunch of people that talked about fucking plants. I was, engaging with people on Instagram that talked about plants and knew what the fuck they were doing with plants. So it became easier for me to do well with fucking plants, right? Um, Always wanted a dog. My mother wasn't with the shits. But when it came time for me to have a dog, can't say I did it 100% right. Did my best. But, tap in. You read a book, Google, look some things up, talk to friends with dogs. I had my own place I still do, but like you get your own place and then it's like, "Oh, this is actually accessible to me now. What do I have to do to make this happen?" So in this case, for me, it's home ownership. It can be whatever it is for you, but curate for you whatever that is going to look like, whether that looks like disabled people that are buying houses, whether that looks like queer people that are taking care of plants, whether that means, Black women that are skateboarding, whatever it is, find the people that create the content or be the person that creates content. Throwing that out there. If there is someone that so happens to reach and that is for you, please be blessed with it. But for me personally, I've noticed that I have been, well, I've always kind of been an HGTV kind of girl. I've absolutely enjoyed and loved a good House Hunters, binging International House Hunters. And for a while, it just would frustrate me, right? It would just get under my skin. It would annoy me. Like, there's the joke, the meme. I am a basket weaver, and my husband is a barista, and we've got $1 million to put down on our home in New York City or whatever. The running joke that the whites have all the money for the houses and they don't even seem to have like lives or jobs that would explain the money, right? Doesn't matter. We're happy for them. Congratulations. Do your shit. What do we need to have whatever that is for us be accessible for us? I have been nonstop watching home renovations. So it was more so I really got into, I've historically been a remodel kind of girl. That's what I used to really watch a lot. Like, I guess I don't know if Chip and Joanna is a good example because I can't say I was like really into their show specifically. Okay, Property Brothers, Love It or List It. Those two get on my nerves, but yes. Um, Shows like that where you're either gonna buy a house or you're gonna remodel a house, constructing a house. Ooh, 100 day build. Love that show. What's the show with the guys in Detroit? Is it Bargain Block, Buy the Block, or something like that? But there are a billion shows. Love them. Always watched them. More recently, I started leaning into shows like No Demo Reno. Absolutely. I feel like that is Todrick. I cannot remember her first name right now, but I think No Demo Reno is her show. Love it. Would absolutely be friends with her in real life. Love her style. Love her personality for the show. Um, and then you've got Carmion Hamilton. I'm trying to remember what her show is. Gorgeous, gorgeous woman. And she does renovations. So basically renovative shows without demo. And it has me kind of leaning into my home now. I rent. It has me leaning into maybe I should do wallpaper. Maybe I should repaint. I haven't repainted since I moved in. I've been here maybe like 13 years or something like that. Haven't painted since then. Not promising I will. I absolutely hate painting. It is a chore. But something about the spirit of change will not leave me alone. And I am leaning so hard into it because just like I didn't believe travel would be for me, just like I have a hard time believing like the home of my dreams is going to be possible for me. What's what's that I'm missing that I might that I have a home, that I have stuff around me that may not necessarily be the rich and famous Robin Leach luxury travel that I saw and thought was the only version of travel, but that I don't want to say in tandem, I don't want to say in mirror, but parallel to, if you will, the same issue I'm having with my personal thoughts on home ownership. So I feel like that's kind of like I'm following. Because I know what's in my head, and I'm trying to make sure that I use the words that I've been so blessed to know to express that to you. And I feel like you're following me, but just to clear it up, let's loop it together one more time. Travel is so much more than vacation. I had to grow to realize that. I had to grow through my little travels to realize that I was traveling even when I didn't know I was traveling. And that whole world of travel opened up for me when I started seeing people that looked like me doing the thing. And so I am challenging you to intersect travel with regular life here and use my example of using people that look like you consuming content that reflects what it is you need to see, to feel, and absorb, that it can be you as well. For whatever it is in life that you are intentionally wanting to shift for you. For me, home ownership. For you, could be whatever it is, but I am challenging you to join me in consuming that fucking content. If you are a queer disabled woman who wants to own a store or who wants to be an entrepreneur, find you queer disabled women who are doing the damn thing. They are there. And if you can't find them, maybe be them and call them to you. But the point is, get out there and curate your timelines. Get out there and curate your television lineup. What you're listening to, whether that be music, whether that be audiobooks, whether that be podcasts, find the representation that you need and consume it. Get on the other side of what you think is possible for you and achieve what we don't even know is right there for us to get. So, more than vacation. And it can be so much more in other different ways for other different things. And I'm hoping that we can all call that in to our lives together. Um, Go USA. Yay, Olympics. That's it. I love yous all. Thank you for being patient with me in my in my illness. I'm feeling so much better. And I hope to continue to be back on schedule with you guys. I have so many episodes going on in the background. I have put a couple calls out to some dream guests. Sorry about that. To some dream guests that I have for some ideas that I've been working on, but just don't have the same appeal as a solo episode as they do with a guest. Also, if you guys have anything that you are particularly interested in, or someone in particular that you are interested in, shoot me an email, dcarry@travelandshippodcast.com. That email is in the description box. And heads up, Twitter is where updates will be. So I tweeted last week that the episode was going to be late. So if for whatever reason you are looking for an update on the show, it's going to be on Twitter. I'm going to just tell you that now. The Twitter is in the description box below. Also, TRAVEL, the letter N, SH_T. That's my Twitter. That's it. See y'all next week. Bye.